Bo and Luke Nation. I'm your co-host, Bo Brabo, and in studio with us today is our other co-host, Luke Carrigan, and we have a great guest, Becky Morrison. Becky is a UC Berkeley certified executive coach with a passion for helping people live happy, priority-aligned lives. After a successful career in financial services, as a litigator and then in a law firm administration, managing several hundred attorneys and staff at one of the country's premier litigation firms, she was looking for a new challenge and transitioned to a small investment firm where she was the chief operations officer. This transition helped Becky recognize that her true passion was people. She started her own coaching practice. Becky's also a lifelong learner who is currently working towards her LLM in taxation from Georgetown Law School and currently lives in Virginia with her husband and 2 children. Becky, welcome to the Bo and Luke Show.
Thank you both for having me here. I'm psyched to be here.
It's awesome. Why don't you start our listeners out, and Luke and I both, with telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I mean, you've covered the high points, right? I mean,
that's the formal stuff.
I know. And what I was going to say is I live in Virginia. I'm a mom to 2 kids, and I'm a lawyer turned coach is how I describe myself. And I sometimes describe myself as a happiness coach, which is sort of a weird place to land after a career spent in litigation and managing lawyers at litigation firms and then working in finance. So it's been kind of a winding road to finding my own happiness recipe, my own definition of success. And then now really focused on helping other people do the same so that they can find what matters most to them, do more of that and less of the rest. And both of those things are challenging, both figuring out what matters, how to do more of it, and then figuring out how to let go of the stuff that doesn't matter to you, but seems to matter to a lot of other people.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. You have a topic that you like to speak about called the formula for maximizing happiness. Tell us a little bit about that. I think we can dive deep into that. Great topic. Everybody wants to be happy. Where do you start off with that topic?
I mean, I think I've just sort of touched on it. In my mind and in my experience in my life and in my work, what I've discovered or concluded is that the formula for maximum happiness is really very simple. Do more of what matters and less of the rest. And that's super simple, not super easy, right? I mean, there's a lot in there to unpack. Do you know what matters? Are you willing to claim what matters? How do you do less of the rest? How do you overcome guilt? How do you say no? How do you match your physical energy to that list of priorities that matter to you? I mean, there's a ton in there, and that's really where my work and my energy is centered.
Wow. Luke, what do you think about that?
You know, it sounds so simple. but I want to dive down this with you and peel this back a little bit. So do more of what matters and less of the rest. In my personal experience, what matters is really a moving target. And it seems like I get it right, you know, and then I'm happy with that aspect, and something else has to go in my life in order to get that. There's peaks and valleys in both. So if I'm like, okay, I need to get my money right, and then my family will be happier because they'll be more secured and taken care of, right? Family life starts to drift back a little bit because I'm really focusing on that. And I kind of find like I'm chasing happiness at that time just to find myself back in a rut in a different part of my life.
Yeah, I hear you. So the way that I start that inquiry into sort of that whole do more of what matters, less of the rest is I start by asking people to identify what season they're in, because I think it's important what you just said, right?
Yeah.
Sort of, where am I today and what matters most to me now, and what do I need to do less of now in order to be happier now? Recognizing that as life evolves, our seasons change. And so owning that change of season, right? I mean, I think we're talking about before the show, you've got a 1-year-old. So I'm imagining a year ago, your life looked pretty different.
Oh yeah.
And 2 years before that, even different still. And so really being tuned into, be real about the season you're in, be real about what matters in this season, what you want more of, what you want less of, and then tune into doing that. And then as the season changes, have that conversation with yourself, do that work with yourself again to own that adjustment instead of feeling like you're chasing it.
I like it.
I do too. Man, my mind is spinning just on, it really is, on my own life. and how to do that and so forth. That's crazy.
So I listened to, all right, so there's this app. I can't think of the name of it right now. It's about meditation. And they have
Headspace, one of those.
it was Headspace.
Yeah.
That's what it was. It was Headspace. And they have these little cartoons beforehand where they tell you stuff. One of them said, the quickest way to happiness is to help somebody else, because happiness is only a sensation that can be felt in the present. And that by thinking about the things that'll make us happy, more money, having our family live in a bigger house, whatever it might be, or how we were happy at one point in our lives, it's counterintuitive because we're moving further away from happiness at that point. I find myself getting stuck in that quite a bit, and then having to remind myself to get out of it. Do you find for yourself that it's never mastered, like that you have to constantly work at it and remind yourself?
Oh, just like balance, right? It's a skill. It's a skill. It's a muscle. You have to practice it. And I would just add to what you're saying. It's easy to look at, I will be happy when. I'll be happy when I have this number in my bank account, when we can live in this kind of house, when I have that kind of car, when I have this job or that title. That's okay. But I guess the one thing that I found fruitful, or one of the things that I found fruitful with my clients, is to really dig into, well, what is it about that thing, fill in the blank, that's going to make you happy? What is it about the house that would make you happy? What is it about that number in your bank account that you think would make you happy? What is it about the car that would make you happy? And let's talk about that and try to figure out ways to have that underlying thing in your life today. Is it comfort? Is it freedom? Is it status symbol? I mean, let's be honest about what it is, and then let's figure out how to make that a part of today instead of planning for when.
Yeah,
I like that.
I do too. And I think that's where, we've talked many times with other folks too, Becky, who've been coaches, any type of coach. But I think that's where the real value of having a coach like yourself, like when you're working one-on-one with a client, because it's beyond counseling and it's not therapy, but it really can help you home in on somebody that can guide you and get you into the mind space of what you just said. Like, what is it that about those things? What's the underlying thing with that? And have them be just open and honest and transparent so that you can actually help them.
Well, I think that's it. And I think, the biggest part about, or one of the biggest parts about coaching for me is that it's a non-judgmental space, right? If I need to say that in a coaching session, like let's say I'm the one being coached, that I want that fancy Mercedes SUV that my 17-year-old is dying for, because that'll make me, then people will know other people will know I've succeeded. I can say that in a coaching session. It's a safe place to say that. My coach isn't going to judge me. My coach isn't going to say, well, how shallow is that? Or,
Right.
something that a friend or a spouse or somebody who is more invested in you as a person, individually out in the outside world might say. And so being able to have a space where you can safely explore the reality of your happiness is a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say to everybody listening, if you have a coach or you're seeking a coach and they judge you, you should probably find a different coach.
Yep. I agree with that. I agree with that.
And the 17-year-olds don't need a Mercedes SUV. You need a coach.
You mean, are you sure? Because she really thinks she does.
Hey.
Well, you never know. You never know. Maybe we could say, what is that underlying feeling that
we've explored it? We've explored it.
Yeah. And do you get an answer? Do you get a good answer?
I get a 17-year-old answer.
Yeah, for sure.
and she knows. I don't want to embarrass her, but yeah. Yeah.
It's probably similar to like a 38-year-old Luke answer.
Hey, we all have that part of us, right? Like we all have that part of us that wants whatever it is just because it'll feel like we've finally arrived. It's that childhood dream, or it's that outside indicator of success that was really going to show that we made it. Everyone has that thing, right? And you might still want that thing, and that might still be important, or it might be an old story and it might be time to let it go and focus on what really is going to drive your happiness and your joy present day.
Yeah. So is there somewhere in there, years and years ago, I don't remember what I was reading, but something, and literally it was just a phrase that said happiness is a choice. And yeah, so see, if everybody could see Becky, there's a big smile on her face. Where does that fall into what you help people with and your coaching and so forth? Is it even a thing? Do you believe that, or is there a lot more to it than just making it that simple?
It is that simple on some level, and then it is way more complicated on others, right? If happiness were just a choice, we could sit down to say, today and say, I'm going to be happy. A lot more people would be happy a lot more of the time, right? So a lot goes into being equipped to make that choice, being equipped to be in that moment and be able to actualize that choice. Is a lot of work that needs to happen around feeling worthy of being happy, around believing that happiness is possible right now and not when, believing that hard work when you're doing what you really love doesn't have to feel hard. I mean, there's a lot of belief shifts that have to happen to support being able to make the happiness choice. So that's my answer.
Nice.
Cool. And I feel like it can kind of be a downward spiral. Like we all feed beasts, I would say, right? Different types of beasts. It's like I always try to think like, okay, if I'm in a bad mood, which beast am I feeding? Because both are gonna grow, right? If it's if it's not the happiness beast and I'm feeding like the sadness beast, whatever I want to call it, it's gonna grow really big, and that sucks, right? And it's tough to get away from that. What do you say to people? Does it say like, hey, stop it? Stop feeding that beast? Or is that it?
It's so interesting that you bring that up. I literally was just in a conversation with a friend, not a client, earlier today, who was having a hard time at work. And there's a lot of things about this particular work situation for this person that are really, really good. And I know that because we're friends and we've talked about it a lot, but they're in a hard patch. And what I said to this person, I said, what you focus on grows, just like you said, right?
Yeah.
And so where do you want your focus to be? We can make a list of all the things that are hard about work right now, or we can make a list of all the things you appreciate about this job.
Yeah.
You pick, or both, if that's what we need to do. But like, where do you want to put your energy and your time? And that's not to say that you ignore the parts that are hard, or you ignore looking for solutions to things that need to change, but truly where you focus grows. And so if you're looking at the positive in a relationship, in a job situation, in any situation, chances are you're going to find more positive. If you're looking at the challenges and the struggles, chances are you're going to find more struggles.
You're absolutely right.
Absolutely right.
Like the human mind just wants to go there. It's like these blanks that we want to fill in for some reason.
You try being trained as a lawyer. I mean, all I want to do is see challenge, right? Or see risk. And so how do you train your brain to move away from that? How do you train to, and let's take that as an example. Truly, I am trained to see the potential problems. I'm trained to see what might go wrong, right? And so growing up, my mom called it borrowing trouble. Like, Becky, why are you borrowing trouble? And so I've really tried to switch it to borrowing joy. And when I catch myself, when I can hear that little voice of my mom in the back of my head, Becky, stop borrowing trouble, because I've gone like, well, what if, and what if, and what if, and what if, I can stop myself and say, you're right. So I can play the what if game either way. I can play the what if it all goes to hell, or I can play the what if it all turns out great.
Right.
Yep.
And that is a choice. That is 100% a choice I can make in the moment.
Wow.
And it's I play that game too sometimes. I try to take it to the end and say like, well, if this happens, it's just all the worst stuff, right? Like you lose your house and your car and everything else. And whenever I get like to the end of it, it almost makes me feel better because it's not that bad. Like it's not the end of the world.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm a lawyer raised by a lawyer. My mom was a lawyer too. And so, I mean, we played that game too. Like, okay, let's play it to its natural conclusion. And I always ended up in some horrible situation alone and dead. And she's like, well, you're not going to care, you're dead. I mean, so there is something to be said for allowing that sometimes too.
Yeah. But yeah, well, go ahead, Bo.
There's probably another podcast episode where we can bring in all of our former lawyer guests and find out why they're not lawyers anymore. And where that transition.
I think that's more than an episode. I think that's an entire
that's a series.
That's like a podcast in and of itself.
It probably is.
Yeah. You call it lawyers that used to be lawyers.
Lawyers that used to be lawyers. I mean, our episode that just came out on Thursday was the same. Lawyer turned entrepreneur and owns 4 different businesses and just killing it, right?
That's awesome.
It's fascinating. Yeah. Super good. I see so many different areas where what you're talking about, Becky, can be applied to so many things, right? And getting focused and what do you want to focus on, and so forth, can be applied to business. And, if you're running your own company or you're an entrepreneur, and what are you going to focus on? It brought me right back to an episode we did with Sarah Apgar, who had just been on Shark Tank. And, Mark Cuban rejected her, and because he thought she was all over the place with her business model. And the comment he made was, it's hard enough for somebody to do one thing right, let alone try to do multiple things right. So when I hear him say things like that, and you're talking about what you're talking about, it kind of brings it full circle to, if you can really get focus, spend the time on that, and having a coach like yourself to help you do that, I think is it just pays volumes. The return on that investment is going to be huge.
Well, I can tell you I'm not perfect at it, but getting better at that trait alone, getting better at really being able to unapologetically prioritize a top priority at any given moment has changed my life. There's no question, right? And that is a skill, I think, that it does pay to do. And I was listening to an earlier episode that you guys recorded, where someone was talking about, like, multitasking is a myth. You can't multitask.
that.
There ain't no such thing, right? And so,
Right.
I mean, that is true. You've got to effectively achieve, you've got to put full focus into what you're doing. And that means, in my world, that means, I talked about this concept of seasons. That means one top priority for this season. There can be one thing, and that one thing has to be the thing that takes precedence above all the other things.
Right.
And then everything else gets in line behind that, and hopefully in order, because then you can make decisions more easily when you're faced with X or Y. You know where they fall.
Right.
Yeah. Gosh, that's awesome.
That was Brody Reardon, wasn't it? You two would get along, Becky.
It wasn't him. It was the woman who's the head of, I can't remember her name. She's the head of Ademco.
Adecco.
Adecco, sorry.
Joyce Russell.
Joyce Russell. Yeah.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you think about that, and you think about Joyce, here's Joyce. She's worked for 30 plus years with the Adecco Group, and she's risen from, local area staffing manager of a local office to now the president of the Adecco Group U.S. Foundation. She's been through it all. She has thought leadership and expertise in that. And you really got to pay attention. If someone's telling you, there's no such thing as multitasking, and it's coming from someone like her, you should probably pay attention, right?
That's right.
That's how I feel.
Hey, look, it really truly came. I mean, I think she told the story. It really truly came from her 10-year-old son.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like that's an excellent reminder too, that we've got some mirrors in our lives, those of us who are parents, who can really tell us whether we're talk or action.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you from our guests, the ones that have the most responsibility and the most on their plate, when we speak to them, it seems like there is nothing else on their plate other than this conversation. And they all have that in common.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It really is.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, right? Because it makes you realize what a gift it is and what a rarity it is to give full focus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I remember one of the CEOs, Jason Leverant, Bo, he was like one of our first episodes.
Yeah, it was at the beginning.
Yeah, at the beginning. And he runs a company, like 80 locations, big staffing firm around the country. And he's home every single night at 5 p.m. and they sit down and eat dinner as a family. And the company's growing like crazy. He's just kicking butt and taking names. Yet he finds time for focus and structure and absolutely everything in his day. Fascinating.
Yeah. And I think, you raise a really good point there, because that is a perfect example of why can't shouldn't be in our vocabulary when it comes to balance and focus and boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
I work with a lot of really interesting, successful people who struggle with exactly that. Well, I want to have more time for my family, but I can't. My business won't support it.
Yep.
That's a choice.
You're right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely.
You're absolutely right about that.
And getting people to confront the reality of the fact that they are making that choice, that's very hard for people to do on their own, absent some in your face experience, that moment that was it Susan described with her kid, or, like something like that really just brings it to the forefront for you.
Yep. So there's one thing that I do, and I think I just stumbled across this just because, I don't know, it's just a feeling I stumbled across, but I find there's a element of freedom in, and I can feel happier the more accountable that I am about a situation. So like, for example, if I say, well, things at work aren't going the way that I want them to, if I say, well, I'm accountable for all of those and they're not going the way that I want them to, and here's what I can change myself, it's almost like freeing just to have that and say, oh, okay, well, here's the things that I can change,
Mhm.
and be able to do that. And when I don't, then I go down this bad path of saying, well, here's all the other external factors that play into me not being happy, or
Yeah.
everyone that's coming down on me. And if I had to put a pinpoint on it, it's just that accountability.
Mhm.
Like the moment I take accountability for that situation, it's like everything else just kind of starts to go, and the clouds start to clear, I guess. To put it.
You have described my favorite
Yes.
parenting technique that has become one of my favorite coaching techniques, which is to ask, what in this situation can you control?
There
Yeah.
we go.
And then
Absolutely.
let's talk about what you're going to do about it.
Right.
And it worked great when I had a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old who were at each other's throats constantly, particularly with the 7-year-old who would be like, it's not fair. And he did this and this happened and then this broke and blah, blah, what in this situation can you control?
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
here's the other thing about it is when something goes wrong and I can't control it, it freaks me out. My brain does not know what to do with that. Now, if I accept ownership of it and I say, well, I'm going to be accountable for this no matter what way it goes, and it goes wrong, if it's my fault, I'm weirdly okay with it.
That might be a you thing. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's
I'm a
other
weird guy. So.
No. Let me say it this way. I'm sure there's other people who are wired the same way, but I think you hit on something important, which is understanding how you're wired, understanding what works for you to make you happier. You've figured out that if you take accountability or figure out how you can be accountable, that's happy making for you. Well, go grab some accountability. You know what I mean? Like, go do it. That's the gist of this work, is getting down to the essence of how you're wired, how you need to function, what you need around you, what matters most to you, and then how to live that way as much as possible and get rid of all the noise that the world brings in.
What are the top things that you see? That are there any themes that keep popping up that you help people with a lot?
I mean, the biggest one that ultimately comes up probably with every client in some way is this idea of sort of worthiness, good enough. Do I deserve to be happy? Do I deserve to be here? Do I deserve to have this success? It comes up in a lot of different flavors. It usually, starts with like, well, I just don't know if I'm, have the confidence or self-belief, but it really comes down to like 99.9% of the world is walking around believing in some way that they are not good enough.
Yeah. That's a
Wow.
common, Luke, that's even a common thing with combat veterans.
Really?
Where,
I believe it.
yeah, when you make it home, right? You make it through and you make it home, and then you have, gosh, even like in even the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and 13 or 14,000 deaths and 40 or 50,000 amputees. And then if you're fine, you're whole and you're alive and you're with your family, it's common to have that feeling of, why me, or why am I
Yeah.
still here, right?
Yep.
Why wasn't I with the rest of them, that didn't make it? What is my purpose? I don't deserve to still be here because so many aren't.
And because I know more intimately than anybody my flaws and failings and
Right.
shortcomings. And so I know all the reasons it shouldn't be me.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and that, whether it's
Yep.
for the job or the person who survived or however you want to frame it. But yeah, I mean, I encounter a lot of that in the work I do with everybody. I was gonna say with leaders, but it's really across my coaching practice. There's rarely a client where we aren't touching on that in some way. So I'd say that's a big piece of it. And then, I mean, always it's about, especially with very driven, very successful people, learning to distinguish what actually matters to you versus what you've grown up or grown to this point believing should matter to you.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that noise around, well, my mom thinks, my spouse thinks, my coworkers think, my boss thinks. No, like really allowing yourself to settle into your own definition of success and then figure out how that's going to fit in with everybody else around you.
I like that.
But that's a big one, being able to claim sort of individually what matters to you.
Yeah. Wow. I tell you, I've done, Luke, Becky, we've done, or me personally, there's been so much growth through even through this podcast and learning from all of our guests. Yeah, I think I've employed about every tactic we've learned so far. Just and truly in a different place of having found focus and purpose and for me and holding myself accountable. So if I look back on and building systems in a battle rhythm, and if I look back on the day, the week, the month, and something didn't go quite right, and it was in my control, I only have myself, and I can hold myself accountable to that, which really kind of propels me to, hey, I don't want to look back and see that it was that I didn't do everything I could do. Even if I don't achieve a certain sales target or something like that.
Sure.
I know that I put forth the effort that I was able to put forth to get to the end of the month, if you will.
Yeah.
It puts you in a powerful position. I feel like I have control over my life.
It makes you the author of your happiness, which very few people take the pen. I mean, really think about it. And I think back over my career. I mean, I had what would on paper would be the trappings of a lot of success, right? I went to a good college. I went to a good law school. I worked at a big law firm. I was a litigator. I was on track to be a partner. I had a husband. I had a kid. It should have been perfect, except it wasn't, because I hadn't picked up the pen. I hadn't said, what is it that matters to me and to my happiness? And what do I want my life and my legacy to look like? And so, it's been a journey of figuring that out for the last 15 years. So it's taken me a minute. I'm a slow learner.
Well, I think that is a super good point, right? Even for everybody listening, that this is another one of those things. It's not like a get rich quick scheme. It's not an overnight thing, right? It takes time. It takes development. It takes practice. It takes coaching and mentorship and effort, right?
Sure.
Which is important.
Yeah. And it's easy to sit here and look back to that person. So, I mean, I left practice literally probably 15 years ago. And it's, to look back at that young mom with the 2-year-old who was overwhelmed and pulled in a million directions. And I can look at it now and be like, wow, why did it take you so long to wake up? But that wasn't the season I was in. I was in a season of new motherhood and a season of being an associate. And I moved from there to sort of the management side, administrative side of law firms. And even in that move, I regained a ton of space in my life and the chance to do more of what mattered to me and the chance to be a mom first and be free, to leave early and not be at the beck and call of litigation clients, which was super fun, but not allowing me to be a mom first, which is what I figured out I wanted. So I found a fit for my season. And then I evolved and evolved and evolved. And here we are today. And who knows where I'll be next. But you're right. It's easy to look back and say, I should have figured it out sooner, which I do sometimes, but rarely. And I'm human. But you do have to appreciate sort of the evolution and unfolding of those seasons and the learning that builds on.
Yeah, I think that's what, Luke, I think that's what we've had even with with this podcast. We're in this season, but it's evolved. And, we could not have predicted 10 months ago, 12 months ago, that we'd be sitting here today, 43 episodes in and still going strong and having amazing guests on the podcast. And I think a good example of, I had a conversation recently. We were talking about podcast statistics, and there's like 1.8 million podcasts globally down on the market, but only 30% of them have been updated in the past 90 days. So so 70%, you're talking over 1 million people have just like, they've lost it. Like it came and went, and whatever, they didn't find purpose with it, or maybe they didn't start out with the purpose, they didn't stick with it, maybe they didn't find happiness with it, who knows. So lots of good analogies with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Wow. This is a great conversation.
Well, thank you. I mean, this has been fun, and it's always, you said you learn by having guests on your podcast,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I've equally had that experience sort of working my way through appearing on different podcasts. I feel like every conversation brings a new take and a new angle that gets you thinking about what you're doing and the work that you're doing and the value that you're adding kind of in a different way, which, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we just talked about, right? Like, you want a life where you're evolving through life, and where you have the pen and you're making the choices, but you're continuing to change and grow as the seasons change and grow.
That's right.
That's the
I
best
love that.
takeaway.
Yeah,
that's
for
the
sure.
takeaway. That's what I'm taking away from it, is identify what season you're in. You said it right at the beginning. I love it, and I need to do more of that.
Yeah. It's before we let you go. Speaking of seasons, right? Because this can actually take you off track if you're not aware of what's happening. So my wife and I were having a conversation recently, and we were literally projecting out to like age 62 when you start drawing Social Security, and it's that financial discussion on the home front, and where are you at, taking snapshot today, where do you think you're going to be at age 62, whatever, right? For me, that's only a little over 10 years from now, and but it's like, that's a neat conversation for that hour, but then you got to shelve it, because that's not the season today, right?
Right.
That's a decade away if we're blessed to have all those years. It's back to focusing on what season are we, and I love that. What season are we in right now? Because I'm not living a decade from now.
I mean, you could, but that would be kind of a waste of today, wouldn't it?
Right. It would. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Super good. So Becky, tell our listeners how they can get in contact with you, how they can find you, whether website, LinkedIn.
Yeah. I mean, so the best place to go is to my website, and that's www.grantleycoaching.com. And if you go to the podcasts tab, you can find out all sorts of information about the podcast I've been on. But more importantly than that, you can get on the list to pre-order my book when it comes out. So I have a book coming out in the spring. It's called The Happiness Recipe, A Powerful Guide for Living What Matters. And it's really an action-based guide that walks you through a lot of what we've talked about today and more. To sort of figure out your happiness recipe for living a happy life right now.
Is your book available for pre-order yet, or it's just information?
Not yet. I mean, it might be by the time this episode comes out, but it is not yet. Probably within the next month or so. So in February of 2021, it should be ready for pre-order.
Nice. Amazon will be available?
Amazon for sure. Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Super cool.
I'm in.
Me too.
Awesome.
Yeah,
guys.
we'll get a copy. We'll do a giveaway. So we'll make sure our listeners learn all about it, and we'll have that all in our show notes. So we'll direct as many people as possible.
Okay. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Luke, any parting thoughts?
It's just been such a pleasure, Becky, having you on. And I took a lot of great things away from this, and I'm sure our listeners will too. So just keep on kicking butt, because you're doing a good thing for not only yourself, but other people. So it's been a pleasure.
I appreciate that.
Thanks, Becky. And
Thanks,
for Bo and
guys.
Luke, oh, you're most welcome. Bo and Luke Nation, that is a wrap. Tune in for a new episode every Thursday. You can subscribe to our email newsletter for information on upcoming guests, giveaways, and more. Rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to our sponsor, Sound United, for quality broadcast audio throughout Season 2.